2 years ago, Mrs. Junta, an art teacher from West Bradford Elementary, came to me and she said, I have a student who can draw with her eyes. And when you think about that, not too many people draw with their eyes. We draw with our hands. Sometimes I've heard people draw with their opposite hands. I've actually seen people draw with their feet or their pen in their mouth, but never with their eyes. So then I started thinking, I was like, how can that be possible for someone to draw with their eyes? So let me show you what they look like before I introduce you to the artist. So here's 3 examples of ways that she drew with her eyes. The one with the pink background and the purple border is her self-portrait. If you go to our administrative building, you'll actually see that on the walls for our gallery, K-12 gallery that's there. The big butterfly is what we call a multimedia, when you use a couple of different materials to make the artwork. So that's a big watercolor butterfly. It has a wire on it, so it kind of wobbles a little. And the little butterfly was actually drawn with her eyes. And then if you see the one with the big blue sky, that one was drawn completely with her eyes. So when I see artwork, I take a moment, I stop, I look, and then you have to kind of think, how did the artist make this artwork? So some of you probably realize how she did this. So let me introduce you to the artist. This is Sara. And you can see that Sara has cerebral palsy, so she's in an electric wheelchair. It's kind of hard for her to walk. That was her, Mrs. Junta, and her mom at the art opening with her artwork behind her. And then you can see there's Sara and I, we were joking around. I had to make a model of her hand that I'll tell you about later. And then I wanted to show you that how Sara drew. She actually had her hand kind of like turns a little bit. So I have that picture so you can see how her hand turns. And she has to have an aide that kind of helps her. So the aide sort of guides her hand along, holds the pencil, and Sara makes the movements. And that's how she drew. The other thing is Sara has a computer connected to her wheelchair. You can sort of see that. But she can't talk like I'm talking to you right now. So with her computer, it's called an eye gaze. And she has to use her eyes to actually make it sort of talk for her. So she looks at the buttons, and then she finds what she wants to say, and then she sees a button, she looks at it, and then it speaks for her. Do you know how much all of you talk every day? A lot? Imagine if you do that with your eyes. She had art with me at the very end of the day. So she'd get there, and I could just see her eyes were so tired. And I was like, I can't make her use her eyes more. But in art, we like to use our hands and get messy. So I was like, she has to find a way to use her hands. I also would just ask her yes and no questions. She had a way of turning her head to the left for no and right for yes. So that way it gave her eyes a little break. I was like, there's somehow I need to find a way to make Sara be able to use her hands to make her artwork. That she could do it all on her own. No one's help. So I had to find that big idea, a spark. So a few years ago, I went to an art teacher conference. They're pretty awesome. It's just all art teachers, and at the art teacher ones, we get free art supplies. And there was one presenter, this is Aiko Fan. She's an art teacher at a school down in Philadelphia that just has students with cerebral palsy. It's all different levels of it. And as she was talking, she had videos of her students that she would explain how she did the artwork. She had artwork from her students. And as she started to talk, Sara popped into my head. And there was this one story I have to share with you that she did. She had a student, he was in an electric wheelchair. He could only move one finger. And she had to have him do art. So she's like, how can I make him do art if all he can do is move one finger? She thought outside the box. She saw a can of soda there. So she crumpled it up. She had a long wooden piece of wood. She connected to that can, and at the end of it she rubber banded a paintbrush, put the paintbrush on there. And because he was in a wheelchair, his arms were up, she found this side table that she moved up right beside it. She put the can on it, had the paintbrush, the canvas, put the paint on, and then she moved his hand and put it on top of it. And right there he just moved his finger, and as he moves his finger, the paintbrush went up and down and moved on the canvas. And then to make it move a little bit different, she put different music on. And he would move his finger to the different rhythms of the music to actually make his artwork. Pretty cool. So then I was like, all right, I need a little help. So I started talking with friends. This is my friend Chris. he's also a teacher down in Philadelphia, but he teaches at the Charter High School of Architecture and Design. And that also machine he's standing by is a 3D printer. And there's a lot of things we can do with 3D printers. So we were talking at the conference, and I told him about Sara, and I was like, can you help me out at all? He's like, absolutely, except you have to do one thing. I was like, okay, tell me what I need to do. He's like, you kind of need to give me the template. Like, we're all busy people. So I was like, all right, I'll find a template that he can use to print it out. So I did what everybody did, and I Googled it. And then as I was Googling it, I did find a solution. In Ability Magazine, there was an author, it was Anna Fernandez, and her sister had cerebral palsy. And she made this model, and it was a glove that went over top of her hand, her sister's hand, so she could write and draw. I took a chance, I emailed her, and surprisingly she emailed me back. She was like, absolutely, I can help. What can I do for you? So we talked back and forth, and one thing, Sara doesn't like a glove over her hand, so she modified it so it was almost, it was 2 rings that went over her finger, so that way she could draw like that. So she emailed me the template, and I was like, awesome. So I sent it off to Chris, and he printed them out. He printed 3 of them. 2 are with plastic, and the plastic that they use for 3D printers are really, really hard. And then he has some other cool things he does. He has bamboo wood that he prints. So he printed one with bamboo wood. So when I got them, the bamboo wood one didn't have rings on it, and the plastic ones just didn't fit her hands. So I was like, all right, I have to make this work. And artists have a ton of things. So I had jewelry wire. So I made the own rings, and I wrapped it around my own fingers. Sara loves purple, so I made sure that I had the purple tape and the purple smiley face. And if you can see, it even has her name on it. I was like, she has to try this out. So she tried it out. She used it for a little bit. She didn't really like it. It didn't really work. So I was like, okay, you have to fail to learn more. So then I was working with Chris again, and he had some senior students, and they do Google Genius Hour. And in there, you can do anything you want and just have to create a project. So he went to these 2 seniors. He told them about Sara and said, do you want to try this out? They said, absolutely. So they took on the project. So here's the model of Sara's hand. So here's the one problem we had. They're in Philadelphia. We're here. It would be really hard to get Sara down to Philadelphia. They had to like measure her hand and fit her and everything. So what I did during one of my free periods, Sara came down to the art room, and I made a model of her hand with wire, newspaper, and masking tape. And the silly thing is, right when I made it, first thing she asked me is she could use it for pranks. So I sent this to Philly, and his students took it, and you can see that they started making some cardboard models of it, started thinking of some ways, and then this is the computers that they used, and this is the program for 3D printers, and they started to try out their ideas to see if they worked. So this was our second attempt. So here's the 3D printer, and it's printing the part that goes up her wrist, and then it holds the marker or the paintbrush, whatever she wanted. And then the other piece is they had a cuff that went over her wrist, and it kind of is like the cuff that Wonder Woman wears. So they realized they couldn't print it all in one piece, so you can see it's in 2 separate pieces. So here's the final piece. They had to find a way to put it together. They had Velcro, so they had it Velcroed on the top, so that way it could go at different lengths depending on what she was using. And then you can see that it has Velcro on the cuff, so that way it makes sure it was really tight. The other thing, they thought a little further. Like, think about hard plastic around your wrist. It could scratch her. So they took it another step further, and they actually covered the inside of it with some really soft felt, so that way it was soft on her arm. All right, so this is the part that you are looking for. So Sara finally last summer, got to try it out, June, right before she left 6th grade center. So I had to kind of like narrate it a little bit.
Sara's first attempt. Okay.
There you go. First time. She put it on. You can see she's really excited.
Yeah. And then, let's see. We should have it right here. All right. Was it sliding? It's sliding. Okay.
So she needs a little help. Someone needs to hold up the paper or the canvas for her.
That works. That works.
But you can see how she moves. This is the first time she ever got to use her own hand to make her own artwork. So we had to modify a little bit. She's kind of hard on it. Hits it pretty hard.
Hold on 1 second. Let's move it down. There we go.
like, oh, color pencil wasn't the first good choice to make.
Oh, okay. All right, you can stop. And then the company like.
So I had to do more modifications, and I did what we all do. I used duct tape, always around,
Marker attempt.
and we found our solution. Markers, duct tape, it helped her out.
That worked once we secured it. Does that feel better? Yeah. Should I turn it a little? Get some horizontal movement. Here we go. Yes, off the page. Ooh, let's keep turning. Should I turn it more? Okay. I'm gonna try to make a circle. Here we go.
Look at you go, Sarah.
She's really trying to refine it. Oh, let's turn it a little. Oh, it got caught on your shirt.
I had to make sure she covered her whole paper, so we keep moving it around.
There we go. You want to add any other colors to it? No? You just want all purple?
So here's Sarah's first artwork, all by herself. No one helped her. And then I asked her, what'd you think? This is her computer screen, and right away she typed, I love it, and she repeated it 3 times. So here's what the final device looks like. You can see the awesome graffiti duct tape that I had to use to make sure that it worked for her. She's now at 7th grade at Downingtown Middle School, and I saw her a couple weeks ago, and she said that she was a little rough and she broke it. So I'm working with my friend Chris again, and we're making the 3rd prototype to make sure that it works. So we're constantly working to make sure that we can make something for Sarah so she can use it. I always knew that I wanted to be an artist, and then I realized I needed to share that passion, so I became an art teacher. And when you come to my art room, I make sure that everyone is successful as they could be with what we were using. And Sarah's one of the students that just needed that little bit of something else. So I had the idea, but I had to find a way to get that idea ready for Sarah. So if you have that little idea, make sure that you talk to people about it. You find resources. Sometimes you gotta fail because you learn from that. And then in the end, you'll have this journey of helping other people, and that's what makes your big idea possible.